What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. Well, it looks like we may have an exciting week on our hands with the Game Awards, and typically it's a lot of temper your expectations out there online. Well, now it appears some are actually pointing out how exciting this event should be. We'll go over some of that here today. Also, we are to be talking about Nintendo heading into 2025 with a certain remaster that appears to have leaked early, as well as yet another accessory for the Switch 2 that's appeared online. And then we also have another handheld that's been revealed. And I've talked about the retro gaming handheld scene, how it seems to be a ton of them popping up all the time. Well, this one is pretty interesting, but it certainly comes down to the price point. So if you guys enjoy these videos, make sure you hit that like button. Helps out a ton. And if new here to the Spawn Wave channel, make sure you subscribe down below. And of course, members to the channel do get Newswave early. If you would like to learn more about that, click the join button down below this video. And we're going to start today with Shenmue 3, which actually has a new publisher now that's in Games. And, well, now that they have control of Shenmue 3, they seem to be asking gamers through a survey where they'd like to see it appear. This we can see posted up. This is over on Noisy Pixel. And the four options they have are Apple or Mac, Xbox Series X and S, Nintendo Switch, and PlayStation 5. It's important to note that Shenmue 3 is technically a PS4 release and works on the PS5 through backwards compatibility. It's not shocking that this publisher in Games would gain access to the rights for Shenmue 3 that was from Deep Silver, and then immediately start thinking about where they can put the game, right? That's pretty obvious, so it seems pretty, I think, pretty sure-handed at this point that we'll at the very least see a PlayStation 5 version of the game, since it is already on the PS4. But I think a Switch version will be kind of interesting along with Xbox, and I don't know, maybe if they make it for Apple for M Silicon, their M4 chip now, that could be kind of interesting just to see how it turns out. Well, here's the other thing with Shenmue is apparently the person making it wants to make another like 4 parts of the game or something, and Shenmue 3 already had a lot of pushback in terms of, well, it really didn't do a lot in terms of the story, so I'm curious to see if this could eventually lead to that, because who knows, maybe in-games could eventually work to publish Shenmue 4, and this is sort of their move to see interest in maybe raising some revenue to make that possible, we'll see. Also, we had a surprise announcement for Fortnite with a new mode, or almost really a new game, that's actually coming out this week. We can see posted up over on their website. Fortnite goes first person with Ballistic. It's a tactical 5v5 shooter in early access December 11th. So they label this as a competitive game mode where strategy, tactical teamwork, and individual prowess are essential for victory. They have a trailer here, and it's funny we're looking at this after we just talked about X-Defiant mentioning that they're going to shut down next year, because this looks very similar to me to X-Defiant. Some are saying like Valorant. I mean, I guess sure, it's a 5v5 style mode that, yeah, tactical, but isn't necessarily like a super in-depth Rainbow Six, I guess, style game. But it's interesting with Fortnite. We've talked about how they were working to make it a quote-unquote platform, and the fact that it started out as this third-person save-the-world style game evolved into the Battle Royale mode, and then you have things like they have like Guitar Hero basically in the game, which looks crazy when you start it up to think that's where they are with it now. And then here we are with a first-person 5v5 tactical shooter. Basically, it's like you log into Fortnite, and then you pick a range of different games in there like a platform. So curious to see where it takes them next, but for now this will be launching December 11th, so I guess check it out, especially if you're already really into Fortnite. Something new to do there. Oh, and I have some unfortunate news for Croc fans who were expecting Croc to come out this year, which well, we're in the second week of December, so unless they're shadow dropping like The Thing, kind of expected that it could be delayed. And in fact, we can see this posted up. This is over on Argonaut Games' official account, saying we have an important update regarding the release of Croc Legend of the Gobos remaster. After careful consideration, we have decided to push the launch into Q1 2025. The decision was not made lightly, but we believe that a little more time is needed to add the final touches to ensure the game meets the high standards that we aspire to and which you deserve. So again, we're coming up to the end of the year. I don't think anyone's too surprised to hear this, considering we're kind of running out of time. And I mean, it's Croc. I'm not saying it's like no one's looking forward to it, but it is going to be a smaller audience that would probably prefer to have this big resurgence, this revival of the franchise to actually have a good outing. So if it gets delayed a few months into Q1 2025, as long as it shows up in good shape, it'll end up being worth it. So we'll keep an eye out with Argonauts to see what their new release date is heading into the new year. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. Let's start right away with Nintendo and their 2025, which actually starts in about 3 weeks. It's hard to believe we're already about to turn over the calendar into 2025, but here we are, and it appears we have a few things now that are getting out online around Nintendo with their hardware, as well as a new software release. First, let's start with the Switch 2. We already saw some accessories, the tempered glass screen protector, the case that showed up online. Well, now we can see this. It's over on Satisfy. They make grips for the current Switch. The Zen Grip 2 or Zen Grip Z, I believe that's 2, but it basically comes down to the center part here, top secret. It's advanced floating design, full port accessibility, and even if you look at the trailer they put out, I mean, it's quick, it's not long at all, but it appears to show something sitting in there, right? And people were like, oh my gosh, is that the Switch 2? It looks kind of like a shadowy version of the Switch 1, kind of, but that's the idea. It's to sort of play into can't quite tell territory, and that's the idea, and that's the thing. Right now, if you are someone who is creating accessories for the Switch and then eventually Switch 2, the dimensions appear to be kind of floating around online. If you can get a basic idea, this is a great marketing tactic here. I mean, I would do the same thing if I had accessories that I could maybe sell for the next-gen device. I'd try to get them about right, and like this, for example, shipping estimated spring 2025. So if it's close enough now to at least show in some videos and marketing material, when Nintendo eventually reveals it, which we'll talk about here again a little bit, then you gotta refine everything, set it up for that release in spring 2025, hopefully around when Nintendo is going to be selling the thing. Which actually brings us to a software release that was leaked out a bit early. This is from Nate over on Nate the Hate. He had his podcast, and this transcribed by VGC, where he says a game that's one of my personal favorites will be coming to the Nintendo Switch in 2025. That title is Kirby Planet Robobot. It's one of the best 3DS games to ever release, and it's that type of title that I think Nintendo continue to use as filler for Switch in 2025. And like, the cross-gen period for Nintendo, or just even the Switch leading up to the Switch 2's release, we already figure a lot of Nintendo's A-team, like their top-tier talent, is working on not only launch titles, but also titles that fit into the first couple of years for their new system, because that's Nintendo widely focuses on themselves when it comes to just selling hardware, right? They use software to push that hardware, no matter what weird and wacky idea they come up with. In this case, they came up with a home run with the Switch and that hybrid design. Seems like they'll continue it with the Switch 2. But in this podcast, Nate also talked a bit about the potential reveal for it, and he's kind of lining it up, I think, as he had sort of alluded to, with the investors meeting that's now been outlined by Nintendo. In fact, if you look over on their IR calendar, they had just updated this the other day, where they have the 9 months earning release. That'll be February 4th, 2025. Nintendo will talk about how their holiday season went, because in this case, the past quarter would cover October, November, and December. Now, it will be kind of awkward once again to show up here with the 9 months earning release, and I think they're going to have, again, a softer earnings report. It'd be kind of awkward in February to not have anything about the next system ready to roll. Even a trailer, a mention, something, right? We already know they're going to talk about it by the end of March 2025. So this will place it pretty close. They're getting up against it then. So that kind of the idea. Okay, look, we'll line it up here, end of January, right ahead of this, because the investors will be, I'm sure, very antsy one way or the other about this system. Even if they show it, there'll be a lot of questions as to what they're going to produce to help sell the thing in terms of different pieces of software and games, of course. So that's kind of where that falls in there. A lot of speculation, and the big thing that was really put out there with certainty was Kirby Planet Robobot, which, hey, it should be pretty cool. It wasn't a game that I necessarily got heavy into on the 3DS. I played some of it, but people really enjoyed it, and I wouldn't mind revisiting it again on the Switch when it comes out, mostly because it turns out my household, a lot of the younger gamers, big Kirby household. So, hey, well, I guess we'll be checking that one out when it drops. But yeah, interesting stuff for Nintendo heading into 2025 with accessories popping up online, hearing about ports and remasters from the 3DS for the Switch, all of which leading up to what we hope to be Nintendo's big reveal for the Switch 2 ahead of this early February investors report. Next up, let's talk about the Game Awards. Those will be kicking off on December 12th at 7:30 p.m. And I'm curious what Jeff has lined up this year, mostly because in previous years, if there wasn't a lot of really big things there, I will admit he downplayed it somewhat, as he was in Twitter Spaces constantly, I feel like back then, even interviews and websites and stuff leading up to the big show. Not as much this year. He's been pretty quiet, all things considered. So I'm curious if he maybe has some big reveals kind of in the background here, and he's just going to kind of let the show do the talking at that point. But it seems like some maybe are getting word of what could be at this event. For example, we can see this is posted up by Jez Corridon, who says, oh boy, Jeff Keighley cooked. Then we have Andy Robinson, this over on VGC, saying expecting a very big Game Awards next week. Fire up the hype train. Someone asked if it was a guess or a hint. He said, definitely not a guess. Now, the thing with that is a lot of the reveals here could be subjective in the sense that, that game is really, really cool. I've been looking forward to hearing more about it. It's exciting stuff. But then other people might be like, I don't really care about that game. So it would have to be something I think real, like to the point where you're like, okay, I didn't expect the Switch 2 to be there. I didn't expect the Xbox Series X to be there, or some new Spider-Man game, or new God of War, or new Mario, or a new Halo. Things that are at least big enough to be like, okay, it's universally known in gaming. That said, it does appear that at least one beloved studio franchise would be there. We can see this actually posted up. This is by D Labs, and it makes sense why it would be here, as the studio has won Game of the Year at this show before, and that's Hazelight Studios. Now, you may remember Hazelight Studios because of Joseph Fares, who's infamous with this show, with some of his off-the-cuff remarks next to Jeff Keighley. But he seems like a lot of fun. He seems to really enjoy his time there. And according to D Labs, seems there is a game that they'll be showcasing here pretty soon. You kind of put two and two together and realize, okay, yeah, makes sense to be at the Game Awards. That game is called Split Fiction, which you kind of look at the name. Okay, yeah, that would make sense considering they've worked with just really co-op style games. They have A Way Out. They have It Takes Two. Split Fiction sounds once again like, you split it up. You'd have two people working together through whatever this game is. I mean, D Labs goes as far as to say that the reveal is imminent, as in like the trailer is pretty much ready to go. So yeah, it most likely would be shown at the Game Awards and then all of a sudden just be uploaded and appear online, YouTube and other places right away. So that would be a pretty cool announcement to have at the Game Awards. I'm also wondering if we could see updates on something like Wonder Woman. I feel like a lot of people have forgotten about that game, and it seems like it's been a while. So I think that'd be a pretty cool one just to see reappear, and then maybe have 2025 set up as like its release year. And the other thing I'm curious about, and another one that's kind of in the background people may have forgotten about, is Tomb Raider. Like that's I think would be really cool to see once again reemerge here from Crystal Dynamics, and what Amazon I think is also working with it, but start to set up 2025. That's usually what I see the Game Awards as. I think it's kind of try to be poised as like the Super Bowl or the Oscars, basically a reset for the gaming industry for the next year, right? It's like the season finale, and then we move on into 2025, start showing some games that will then be coming out in the next 12 months. And these seem like two that have been in development for quite some time, and I think would line up nicely to come out next year. So that's kind of what I'm looking for, those two games. I'm trying to wonder if Sony, Microsoft, or Nintendo would be there in some meaningful way. Well, that was actually the poll question I posed to many of you, and we'll go over that later on in the show. Next up, let's talk about a new retro gaming handheld. And these things come out constantly. I feel like every other week, a new one is being announced or revealed, and I say new in quotes, because most of the time it's just a change of the body style that doesn't really look even that much different than the previous one, and it's still running the same chipset or everything internally. Well, in this case, at least the form factor change makes sense, and I actually think it looks pretty cool. So you can see some of the video here, and they showcase this, that being Anbernic, in a video on their YouTube account, and they just spent time playing different games on this. This, they say, is the Anbernic RG34XX. Say classic fun gaming with extended features demonstration. Now, I will say some of the extended features are just things I don't think are going to be used much. They had one that was like, you can read documents on this. Okay, they have one that's like, it's a media play, like multimedia, you can listen to music on it. Look, I think I would buy the thing that looks like a Game Boy Advance, probably to play Game Boy Advance games. And in fact, it seems like it's set up specifically for that, despite having the ability to do some other stuff, other games. Like, it features a 3.4-inch IPS full lamination screen with a resolution of 720 by 480. You might think that sounds weird, but that's actually 3 times the size, perfectly actually, of the Game Boy Advance screen like setup. So when I see that, I realize, okay, it should be pretty good with emulating Game Boy Advance games. They also mentioned 30 platforms: PSP, N64, DS, DOS, Dreamcast, PS. I just don't really think this is going to be set up well to do most of those. But I think if you bought this understanding, hey, this would make a really cool Game Boy Advance. It'd make a good Super Nintendo, good Nintendo. Kind of a good Genesis. They have 4 face buttons there. I like that 2 of them are colored differently to kind of blend in with the design of the handheld. However, to me, this all comes down to the price. If it's too expensive, it's like, okay, well, I'm not really just going to buy this one thing necessarily, or I'm at least going to think about it a little bit more. Say if it was, I mean, it's like 60 or 70 bucks. I think I get away with that, especially because the screen should be fairly high quality, and the form factor, yes, is very unique, but it brings back the Game Boy Advance vibes, obviously. I like the form factor, and I think I'm gonna be checking this out when it does finally release, which we're still waiting for that, along with the price point, so I'll keep an eye on this, and maybe do a tech wave down the road. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an update around Ubisoft, which I actually covered over the weekend, so check that out, because Ubisoft's in a lot of trouble right now. I mean, really, there are even talks around buyouts with investors trying to figure this out with Tencent even, and that's a whole rabbit hole to go down there, but there's also another possibility that's being presented by an analyst, which this we can see was posted up. This is over on Tweaktown, as they are quoting an industry expert analyst, Joost van Drunen, the founder of now absorbed analyst firm Superdata, and they believe that the French publisher will be made private and actually even sell off parts of itself. So he says Ubisoft is headed for privatization and dismantling in 2025. The upcoming Assassin's Creed Shadows faces stiff competition from PlayStation's Ghost of Yotei, and recent failures suggest deeper organizational issues beyond individual game performance. Ubisoft's development approach remains stubbornly outdated in an era demanding player engagement and community building. Without a fundamental shift in how they develop and maintain games, they risk further alienation, both investors and players. The XDefiant shutdown isn't just another failed launch, it's a symptom of a company that insists on catering to a passive audience while failing to recognize the urgency to rethink distribution. So I think overall, just the leadership at Ubisoft, the Guillemot family, they still want to keep control of the company, even if there is a buyout. Like, let's say investors figured out with Tencent comes in and essentially buys the bulk of Ubisoft, or like a large chunk, and they're then in control. The Guillemot family still wants to actually call the shots. I just don't know why you would do that if you were Tencent or anyone serious about investing and then buying Ubisoft. It hasn't worked out this whole time. Why would you keep them in control? And that's apparently the hang up now. So barring some hostile takeover or something, I'm not really sure what happens to Ubisoft. It really could come down to, well, they can't keep making things work. Layoffs will continue to on and on and on and on. And maybe they will end up selling off parts of them. Intellectual properties that they can't do anything with right now, or in their mind, just isn't lucrative enough for them to pursue. And maybe they will turn into mostly a Division, Assassin's Creed, and Far Cry company with some Tom Clancy stuff mixed in there in terms of with Rainbow Six and maybe some Splinter Cell. I mean, that's kind of where Ubisoft is now. So troubling times ahead for them. I'll be curious to see what exactly they're able to figure out here going forward. And before we go to the comment of the day, we'll take a look at the poll that I posted up yesterday, where I ask, which of the major platform holders is most likely to have a major announcement at the Game Awards this week? Okay, Sony is leading the way, 41%, 32% say Microsoft, and 27% say Nintendo. So I'm inclined to think Microsoft a little bit here, mostly because Jez Corden mentioning, Jeff Keighley cooked. Typically, he has more ties to Microsoft than anyone else, so I go, okay, maybe Microsoft has something cool to show there. But then on the other side, there have been discussions around Wolverine actually getting it showcased in some way before the end of this year. We also know that Sony apparently has different accessories and things to show off soon. It's going to be announced in December. Well, once again, there's one event coming up here before the end of the year, and that's the Game Awards. So I actually think Microsoft and Nintendo could both be at this event in some meaningful way. Nintendo is still that wild card. Could they show up with Metroid? I mean, Metroid Prime, think about it, that is more of a Western game. The Game Awards tends to get a large Western viewership. I mean, it wouldn't be a bad spot for it, especially if you have a release date in mind and you can show it there with a really cool looking trailer. To me, it all adds up there for Nintendo. So really, any of these companies can show up. If I had to put money on it, though, I'd probably say Sony with something like Wolverine getting a showing. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Genetic, who says, I'm not concerned as to what critics have to say for game reviews. They also gave Dragon Age the Veilguard the same scores, but with as great as that game is according to critics, it wasn't able to break 100K on Steam, and fizzled out very quickly. Well, I would say the situation we run into right now with reviews is that it always has a score attached to it. That's just kind of how it's always been. You go through an entire, could be 1,000, 2,000 word review, but it always boils down to the number score at the bottom that, let's face it, most of the time ends up being a 7 or an 8. Unless it's bad, and it's it's a 5. That's a lot of times it's a safe score, 7 to 8. And if it's something incredible, then you go 9 or 10, right? That's kind of how it's worked. I understand you get different reviewers at all these outlets. Seriously, there's so many different reviewers that can cover different games. It's hard to make these comparables now. It is. So That's why one of the jokes with Famitsu is like they gave Sonic Forces a 35 out of 40. It's like, does your favorite game end up beating that? And many times it doesn't. It doesn't make any sense, but you just get different reviewers. The scores add up differently. They come up with different things they don't like and they like, and then you end up with the same score across the board for games that don't make a lot of sense to you. That's just kind of how it is. It's just the number system feels like it's kind of archaic, but I really don't know any other way how you'd really judge these things. The scale of 1 to 10 usually makes sense, but we don't really use 1 through 5 ever. So maybe that is what needs to change somehow. We need to start using the entirety of the 1 through 10 scale to where 1 isn't necessarily just broken and terrible and like burns your system to the ground or something. We need to come up with a way to make it so that 5 is average, like it's that C territory, and then you work up or down from there. Unfortunately, doesn't seem like it's ever really going to happen since most the different outlets rest on 7 being average, and then you work away from there. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. If you enjoyed this video, guys, hit that like button. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about here today. If you missed last week's Newswave, I'll leave it up here on a card, or maybe you want to hear about Ubisoft's struggles, as I did an entire video breaking all of that down. I'll leave that right below it. Thanks, guys, for watching, and I'll see you next time.